my brain is dying. It's failing to generate a kind of working level of dopamine, the kind of joy gland or the joy chemical. I think joy is not the right word for it. Joy is too overtly upside. I think that the deep compromise that's got me now and will not release me has something closer to the capacity to derive a fundamental sense of well-being from the oncomingness of life.
The container is now open. On this episode, Cy speaks with none other than Stephen Jenkinson. He is the author behind such legendary classics as Die Wise and Matrimony. And now he has a new book called Trembling Still, which covers in harrowing detail the days after his Parkinson's diagnosis. In this book, the death guy actually confronts his own mortality, and it's a gripping read with a lot of heart. Before we get into this really intimate conversation, I would just like to give a special shout out to our patrons. They went to patreon.com/thecontainer, and they made a commitment to give small monthly contributions that keep this ship afloat. Other ways you can support the show is by liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment on our YouTube, or if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, giving us a rating and a review. That really means a lot, and it helps us bring you conversations just like this every single week. Thank you. And now here is Cy's conversation with Stephen Jenkinson.
So today I am speaking with someone who has shaped how I understand death, how I listen, and how I sit with what cannot be fixed. And now he finds himself inside of something that none of us can really prepare for. So this conversation it's not about a book exactly, though there is a book. And it's not about an illness, though there's maybe that too. But it's maybe about what happens when the part of us that makes sense of things begins to falter. What remains, what refuses to resolve. Whew. So I want to invite, as you listen, to let yourself be met and maybe a little unsettled, the way that really true things can unsettle you at times. This is my conversation with Stephen Jenkinson, and yeah, welcome, Stephen. I know that some of our audience might not be super familiar with your work, so I'd love it, not as familiar as I am, so I'd love it if you could introduce yourself and let us know what you do in this world, and then get into this more recent contribution with Trembling Still, as I am right now, trembling still.
Yeah. I know the feeling. Well, typically I don't introduce myself. I mean, hopefully the way one proceeds is a slow, properly gradual introduction, without the heavy-handedness of credentials and all the rest. Suffice to say, probably I may have come to your attention over the years as a result of my time working in what I call the death trade, or palliative care, as many people would know it. Yes. Which is over now some considerable time ago. I mean, the last time I worked gainfully in the medical system would be, I think it's at least 10, 15 years, or maybe longer, maybe 20 years ago, something like that. So, I mean, don't listen to me, because clearly my whole thing is outdated and all the rest. Although some people don't take the hint and they continue to insist that there's some merit, not only in the book I wrote called Die Wise, which is kind of the essence of what I saw and learned in the front lines there, and what I didn't see and should have been able to learn and had a very hard time doing so. from there, and I've written, I guess, 8 or so books through the years, with the kind of through line being that I never really understood myself very well to be a kind of psychological practitioner or preoccupied at that level with the human affairs, but more of a culture worker. I understand my principal obligation to be in that area. And from there, I put together an orphan wisdom school, which lasted for about a dozen years here on the farm. We have a teaching hall just in one of the pastures over that way. And then from there, I got put together a band, and we toured internationally with an event we called Nights of Grief and Mystery. And shamelessly, I'm going to frankly plug the fact that here's my new record. It's not quite out yet, and it's not the Caldera. See,
Caldera.
And so you can see the human heart there, but you would know that Caldera also has volcanic and seismic implications. So this is a record about that's the title of the songs in the back there.
Wow.
And it's a record about the human heart and the heart's way among us, and of course love and romance and other things, but devotion and pilgrimage and an engagement with God in the wilderness. Those are a few of the high points of the record as we understand it this time around. It's a double LP, so it's a very generous record, I think. And what more recently? I farm a lot, or at least I supervise, or at least I subsidize the farm. That's probably a better way to say it. And the farm seems to do quite well without me, but not necessarily well without the subsidies. So we keep it going. And we were shearing the sheep this morning, as a matter of fact. And it's a beautiful day. And I'm lucky to be on the receiving end of your interest and some of your concerns. And we'll go to them promptly.
Something that came up for me recently with a friend in a conversation. Well, it's really a practice that we do together, of being really present and here together. And we were discussing it after the practice, and he said, what do you do with words if not to establish shared reality or to make meaning? And that phrase or that sentence just kept resonating for me. And then it was connecting me to this book that you wrote, Trembling Still, with that same idea of like, what do you do? How do you make meaning when you're faced with something that you couldn't, I don't know, something you didn't see coming. It's like you wrote the book Die Wise, but yeah, that's kind of where I'd like to start, if that feels like a place you can bite into. I don't know.
So the question has something to do with the engagement with the possibility of meaning in how you carry yourself verbally.
Yeah.
Well, I'm lucky, to be honest, in that regard. I think, not to brag too much, but a little bit, in standard Canadian fashion, a little bit of bragging. We leave the lion's share of the bragging to the Americans, but we do it a little bit, and then we're embarrassed when we do so, So I'll embarrass myself now and say, I think I was lucky. I have some kind of general Celtic or Irish in the background there, and their gift with the language survived all the transatlantic crossings and all the transmission gaffes and all the rest, and came to me. And they've said as much, when I've taught there over the years. I've been very lucky to be on the receiving end of their claim upon me. So very lucky that way. And the language, I won't say it's come easily, but readily though. So I've made a living by wondering about things aloud, or by being troubled aloud, frankly. That's a lion's share of it, probably. And, the failure to elaborate and elevate your language over time is basically a kind of truancy that any proper citizen of a going concern has an obligation to, I'd say. So it's not just a matter of, we're not talking about yammer here. We're talking about the capacity to hold in high regard not only the things you're talking about, but your ability and the occasion for talking about them as well.
Yeah.
Right. So when that regard is there, I think the things you're addressing actually experience the regard. They experience your respect of them in how you speak your way towards them. And they, in some fashion, rise and come towards your respect. And there's a kind of beautiful engagement, a beautiful kind of rolling thunder of meaning between the two of you, if you're lucky. But you've got to learn the language, you know. You don't learn the language in the quote in the media. You learn the travesties foisted upon the language, certainly there. And it's not clear to me that you learn it at school, sadly, as school becomes more and more. I'm not even going to get into it, what's happened of the formal education. But suffice to say that we do have the opportunity. Let's put it this way. Although you would never be able to tell from looking at me or watching me move, I have a faint and passing familiarity with yoga. Not really as a practitioner, but as a fan from a distance, right? I'm one of those guys. And I haven't bothered myself with it, but I have some regard for it. And especially for the yogis, what it seems to me that they did was they took something that they were going to do anyway, come what may, which is, quote, have a body and get up in the morning, move around the place, and breathe, of course. So they took this inevitability called breath, and then they just attached an awful lot of discipline and high regard for the enterprise and employed the ordinariness of it to deepen it somehow. So I took the inspiration from that practice, and I think I do that with speaking. We're going to do it anyway. Let's be disciplined and inquiring about it. And I think that meaning rises as a consequence of the kind of good faith engagement you have with this gift entrusted to you by former generations.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the book if you're interested, if you're willing.
I'm certainly interested. I wrote The Beast, so.
You did write The Beast.
I did, yes.
So can you tell us what it's about?
Well, I mean, this is a bit of a fool's errand, to imagine that something's, quote, about something. I know it's a common enough question and there's no offense in it or no problem, but for me, it's not clear to me that works of scholarship and erudition, and especially of art, they're not really principally about something. They are unto themselves something. And they employ things of this world to do their business, to arise among us as they do. And I think this book answers that description. But very prosaically, what happened was, so I was on the stage with the Knights of Grief and Mystery, and we were rocking as we do from time to time. And it wasn't my turn to be in the spotlight. I'm usually the front guy, but my partner was, I think he was playing a solo, if I recall, and the band was chugging pretty well. And I had these in-ear monitors, I could hear everything like acutely that was going on all around me, people's inhales, everything. And I'm keeping time, whatever it was. And I could hear very clearly the finger popping in my ears, but I could only hear it from one hand, even though both hands were doing the gesture. And I'll show you the difference.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember noticing that, in mid-flight in the show, and just kind of thinking to myself, what's that all about? And I didn't think much about it. And the tour ended probably a month later or something like this. And by this time, I noticed a vague, involuntary tremor, not as emphatic as you see now, but just a little movement of the finger on its own, as if it had made a decision to part company with me and was engaged in some other kind of business. That's what it was like. So I held my hand out and I just watched it for a while. And I thought I could see from time to time some kind of movement. Long story short, go to the local doctor here. She says, well, they gave a couple of words, names for certain syndromes, let's call them. Could be that, which is benign, fairly benign. Could be this, which is slightly less benign. And then there was a pause, which is never a thing you want to hear in the doctor's office, a pause where it looks like she's, quote, trying to find the words, not because she doesn't know them, but because there's something up.
Yeah.
I've been in this circumstance with physicians many, many times in the death trade as they grope for the words, and they know they have to say them. Anyway, she did say, she said, or it could be Parkinson's. I didn't really even know what that was, but I knew it wasn't good. So she said, we could get you an appointment with a specialist, a neurologist, take about a year. A year. I said, thanks very much. I pulled in a few favors because I do know some people. And I was in on the 2nd of January, 2024. Is that correct? Yes, 2024. I'm in a neurologist's office. He's having me do 3 or 4 minutes of very simple, turn your hands over, tap back, just ordinary stuff. And as if he's talking about the weather outside, he says, oh yeah, Parkinson's. Just like that. Just threw it off the top of his head. Oh yeah. And I kind of remember the rest of the meeting, but I can tell you that there was a kind of implosion in that moment that was so severe and so non-negotiable and so relentlessly destructive that I staggered out of the joint, really. And the enduring memory I have from that day is when we got out onto the street or the parking lot, whatever it was, I couldn't find a reason to get in the car to go anywhere. I couldn't find a reason to decide anything. In other words, I couldn't locate suddenly my life at all. I mean, at all. And that was the beginning of a probably 16, 17-month sojourn in a kind of psychic wilderness that nothing in my previous experiences helped me understand anytime soon. And this book was something I was doing basically because it was one of the few things I could, quote, still do because of my habit of writing over the years. So every couple of days I would go to this thing and I would write something down, and I never read it again for the entire year that I wrote this thing. I never reviewed it. I never had a sense of what I was doing. I never had a sense of audience or purpose or goal or structure or nothing. I was writing. I could be dramatic and say to you, I was writing to stay alive or to stay sane in some way, or to mitigate despair, which was so acute and so immediate. It was astounding. It was like, man, of all the things I know how to do, God, did I ever know how to despair, as it turned out. Yeah. And so the writing was just part of the despairing. It wasn't part of the safety net or safety line or a lifeboat, or it was of absolutely no help at all. But I wrote it. And then I sat on it for a little while. And then I sent it to a couple of people. And they wrote back and they said, this is mad good. we want to be able to publish it. And that was the first time I read it, when I read the first editor's response to the book, in which they said, you know, there's sentences in here that are so compact, so intensely caved in upon themselves, that they're virtually inaccessible to somebody who probably doesn't actually live with you. And so we have to do something to pry these things open a little bit and allow whatever's in them, et cetera, et cetera. And that was the first time I had to think about it from the craft point of view and the compositional stuff. But anyway, it's as raw. Oh no, it's way past anything I've ever done for its faithfulness to how, I love this word too, how ramshackling a time it was.
The foreclosed upon present, I think, are some words from your book. Exactly. Yeah. That I was going to ask you what that meant experientially, and I think you just really beautifully described.
Well, I can give you a little more, actually.
Yeah, please do.
The science, such as I understand it, okay, so don't take me to the bank on this thing, but the science as I understand it is, this is look, my brain is dying, is what's happening here. And specifically, it's failing to generate a kind of working level of dopamine. That's a big part of the thing. Now, dopamine, if you look it up, it's allegedly the kind of joy gland, if you will, or the joy chemical. But you know, at least from here, I think joy is not the right word for it. Joy is too overtly upside. I think what it is, I think that the deep compromise that's got me now and will not release me has something closer to the capacity to derive a fundamental sense of well-being from the oncomingness of life.
Wow.
That's what it is. Joy's in there, but a lot of things are in there too that belong, that seem to be the opposite, or at least not much to do with joy, but they belong in it as well. So the immense wreckage of the thing is, you go to bed and you wonder when you wake up in the morning, what kind of compromise has come to you in the night?
There was a time, there was a moment, there was a half of a year in my life, in my mid-30s, when I went through this arc that is, and this is why your book touched me so deeply, where I went to a doctor for a normal physical, and he noticed a tremor in my hand. And the same thing happened. He's like, oh, well, it could be benign. It could just be this idiopathic, or it could be early onset Parkinson's. And unlike you, I had to wait 6 months to see a neurologist. So for 6 months, in my mid-30s, working as a barista at Whole Foods Market, I sat on that iPad behind the counter when no one was there, thinking I had early onset Parkinson's, wondering what my life was going to be, wondering how Michael J. Fox, made it, how, what would this mean for my children? What was anything going to mean anymore? And so when you mentioned a little while ago about these fragmented sentences, or like, that there were pieces of this book that were so raw, that was like, those pieces were what so deeply touched me as I read it, was just how completely resonant it was to my own personal experience. And so, when you say like going to bed and wondering about waking up, I think I got to touch that. And of course it didn't turn out to be Parkinson's. They told me it was this other horribly debilitating disorder, that it was going to get worse as I aged, and then it disappeared mysteriously. So here we are. You never know what it's going to look like. They said I needed to get Botox injections all over my neck, and I didn't do that. I went to a healer instead, and the rest is history. But Yeah. Something I listened to of yours from Nights in Grief and Mystery recently was a story you told about a palliative care nurse that called you telling you that it was her turn, that she thought she was going to die and then found out she wasn't.
Right.
And somehow that connects for me, these parallel, stories. And I want to contemplate and approach the silence of God while I can still hear.
Right. Good line,
That
no?
is quite a line.
I know.
Um,
I'm proud of it. What's going on there? Was I seeking, forgiveness or favor or redemption or healing or shit? Yes, of course. All of that and stuff I can't even think of. For sure, I would have thrown myself at the foot of you name it at various times, for sure. And I'm sure those times aren't over. But in this case, here's the thing. And given your experience you just related to me, you'll appreciate that, or you'll hear this in a way others may be challenged to. If they give you a diagnosis, almost no matter what it is for the moment, but if they give you a diagnosis about your feet, it will have a certain range of meaning and consequence for your life, no doubt. If they do the same thing about your kneecaps, so on, and your spleen and your liver, your kidneys, your lungs, your heart, etc. All of these things will have cascading consequence for your sense of yourself and what's possible and what's likely and what's fair and what's just and what's merciful. All of that's wrapped up in there. But I do tell you this, having been around for a while now, when they're talking about your mind, it is frankly a different order of consequence you are in line for. And as best as I can figure it out, this is why. There is something about your knees and your kidneys, which are not in any way extraneous or not less important, but it's not clear that that the quintessence of you lives there. You may employ them. You may be a modern dancer and you need those knees to really work. And certainly you're in there somewhere. But I think you take the point I'm making. There's something about yourself, which when they're talking about a compromise in your mind, compromises your capacity to be that self.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Immediately.
Not long term. Immediately. I don't know about permanently, but I'll certainly say immediately and irrevocably for the foreseeable. That's the consequence of letting it in. And for the first couple of days, I don't think I did. In fact, I was so vehemently contending with this thing that I actually couldn't remember what it was called. How about that for denial? I literally couldn't remember the name. For days on end, I go, what the frig is that thing again? Not quite that neutrally. And you read the book, so you probably know how the story ends. But the way I finally remembered how to remember the name of the diagnosis was the remarkable resemblance between the name of the disease and my own surname.
Yes, Jenkinson, Parkinson, Jenkinson,
Correct.
Parkinson.
And that was going to be the original title of the book.
Whoa.
Yeah, Jenkinson, Parkinson. Yeah. So when your mind's at play,
all bets are off.
Well, you're not. It's curiosity is gone. There may be people who fashioned a degree of idle curiosity or sort of neutral, about receiving the news, but I'd be staggered if they could maintain that beyond a couple of days. If they're willing to do any kind of exponential math on what's to become of them, given what they've just been told. I think, to my mind, devastation is the order of the day. And here's really why. This is the through line I was going to mention a minute ago. Where does this thing called yourself, where does it reside? I mean, certainly it employs your body and vice versa. But, you know, we make a distinction between I hurt my finger and I hurt myself. When you're very young, you say, I hurt myself no matter where you did it. Isn't it true? But as you get older, you can distinguish fingers from hands, from feet, from nose, etc. But there's something about self. It's not clear, at least to an Anglo-North American with that kind of cultural background. It's not quite clear that the self takes up residence anywhere more emphatically than, quote, in the mind. Whether, I don't know that it's a product of the mind, or that it produces the mind, or that the mind thinks these selves up. There's a lot of things we could say about it. But for the moment, I'll just say to you, you know, you grow quite fond of yourself, no matter how self-hating you may be from time to time. And by fond, I don't mean that in a positive way. I just mean you grow so accustomed to the habits of selfhood that you arrange around yourself, that when there's some disturbance introduced into that thing, your literally now, your ability to be yourself is up for grabs. And there's no plan B. And yet you sit and you look compos mentis, as they say. You can take up room. You can go from here to there. And all of this is on the friggin' installment plan. And once you get this news, you can see the grains of consciousness, of alertness, of capacity, of dexterity. You can see the grains of all those things passing through the hourglass, hourly. And so there's this monstrous, truly monstrous question that comes over and over again, which is, what are you doing with what is left of what you thought your allotment was?
Yeah.
That's the deal of deals right there. What are you doing given what you now know, or do you know it? Or are your habits so strong? Are you so fond of them that you return to them over and over and over again, even though you've got every reason you could ever have for leaving them finally behind?
So how are you doing, Stephen, with your
You know,
allotment?
the best advice I got is the only one I can remember, where somebody in the first few days said to me, well, you can count on this: good days, bad days. That's all they said. And I thought, fucking fortune cookie, like, who needs that kind of stuff? You know, I really did think that, probably, minus the F-bomb maybe. And as time went by, I come to realize it's not advice. It's a kind of weather report. And it's a very valuable weather report to have. Good days, bad days, which is to say, stuff will come up. I don't cause it. There's nothing I do to cause it. I can't make it better. I can't make it worse. Well, I could probably make it worse if I just self-harmed like crazy. But I mean, in the normal comings and goings, I can't relate a good day to enough sleep or thinking good thoughts or high-fiving the universe or any of that gear. And by the same token, a bad day doesn't seem to be a consequence of having messed up desperately or self-medicating or any of that stuff. So it's this remarkable dislocation between apparent cause and trying to find the connection to any kind of effect. So you're not much of an agent. You can't exercise much in the way of sovereignty or independent decision making, and the consequences for this are beyond any experience you had to ready you or enable you to figure out how to do it. Here's what I mean. You may remember the scene from the book. It was the first time I went to see the bank manager, who were very friendly. This is what happens out in the country: is these people are not autonomous or anonymous, functionaries in an office somewhere. You actually rely upon them, and you have more than a passing acquaintance with each other, and you happen to live in the same community, and he happens to be a farmer as well. Anyway, so he came in, sat down, and I knew he knew. So we're talking, and we get into whatever the business at hand was, tax related. I think it was something. 10 minutes. And then there's a break and whatever we're talking about. And then he kind of leans forward a little bit and he says, "How are you?" And I know this is his segue, that he's inviting me to let him in on as much as I want to let him in on. And I can tell you for the rest of the meeting, and I'm not sure how true this is, but for the rest of the meeting, I watched him watch me for signs of slippage, for signs of not quite here, or not quite clear, or didn't quite have understanding of what just transpired. Or, in other words, I had an experience for the very first time in my life of somebody looking at me, wondering about, in a general way, about my competence. And when you get looked at like that, something can change in you that may never change back. You may introject that look, and you may cultivate it as a way of regarding yourself as the most legitimate, or the only way to consider yourself. And you are sunk if that's what you do. I mean, you're out of your mind well before your mind heads out the door. So that's a long-winded way of saying, how am I doing? Well, I mean, that's the answer I give you now. An hour from now, could be different.
I imagine you're not sunk at all.
Oh, there are times.
There are times.
Oh, yes, there are times. I mean, there's nothing spectacular about talking about them. They're very ordinary. I mean, despair is remarkably ordinary proposition. And there's despair sometimes so acute that, why? Because I can't sit still. Because stillness was once upon a time very valuable thing for me. I could just linger, or a beautiful Old Testament word that I love a lot, I could abide. I could really do that for hours on end.
Yeah.
I cannot overtly do that now. It appears that I'm in a degree of low-grade agitation off and on for a lot of the time. I'm not actually, but the appearance of it is very persuasive. It's very dismaying, no? That I'm sending out these signals of disarray and so on, that I'm powerless to rein in, but they're not entirely an accurate portrayal of what's actually going on.
Right. And there's signals that other people see and notice, and then that you notice as well. And I imagine.
Well, I noticed them noticing as well.
Noticing them noticing, yeah.
That's another layer.
Yeah.
Sure. So they start interacting with that. And then they start, effectively, you could say, holding the door for me. Do you know what I mean by that? In other words, not just literally holding a door, but a kind of generic enabling kind of thing, as if I am now officially differently abled. So that's like immediate. And when that kicks in there, that's in there now. But listen, I should say, it's a pretty good book. I mean, it sounds like a rough ride. And I will admit to you, it is. Properly, authentically so. It's a rough ride. I didn't say read, ride. It's a ride, and it's hard. It's humanly hard, the book is. And it's other things besides. Yeah, it's funny. There's funny stuff in there. Not to break the spell, not to shift the course of things, just to be authentic that, this doesn't banish humor entirely. There's funny stuff that happens. But at the end of the day, it's a book that's it's a kind of love song that passes through the filter of what the subtitle says, the awful clarity of a mind in eclipse. The awful clarity.
Yeah.
Yeah. And awful means what? Full of awe.
What does it mean? Full of awe.
Full of awe. And awe seems to me to be our first religion as human beings.
Yeah.
To be awestruck by the ordinariness of days. So the awful clarity of a mind in eclipse. Yes, it's that too. And it makes certain things, it reveals certain things that you wish you could have found another way to have revealed to you. But that's not the way it went. So I'm very, very proud of the book, actually. And I just recently recorded the audio version.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, and I had to find the voices because this was the very first time I read it aloud. I ever heard it is when I was doing it. And I'm trying to find the inflection and the range and the sound, which I have a lot of experience doing, But in this case, never an experience like this, where I'm trying to figure out what should that entry of the 24th of November sound like?
Sound like, yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, that sounds like a really fun project in a way. There's some
It was grand.
creativity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's coming out on July 17th of this year. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. 7th.
Ooh, the 7th of July.
Mm-hmm.
Coming right up. And then I know that you're welcoming people. If that's still an open invitation, the week of is it July 17th through the 20th or 16th?
I think 16 to 20. That's right.
Yeah. And
We're having a session here at the
notes.
farm for the first time since I closed the school, actually.
Wow.
Of this magnitude, of this order. And then I'm going to do something very similar in Wales about 3 weeks later in the UK. And then towards the end of the year, I'm going to do something similar in Santa Fe, probably Santa Fe, around sometime in October. So, and these are sessions devoted very much to what we're talking about now, but with an opportunity to really elaborate the nature of mind and soul and whether or not God is recognizable or whether God is recognition. I mean, honestly, it's my thing to wonder about these things at this level out loud with compatriots, with companions. There's rarely been anything better than that.
Well, I know that I am looking very forward to being there with you in July, actually.
All right, really? Okay, great.
Yeah. In the sewing studio.
Oh, yes, sure. Sure.
I just want to express my deepest gratitude and awe and wonder for this hour that you've given us, this time you've given us here. And just say thank you so much for this contribution and for all of your contributions. I know that I know a lot of people that will really be fed by this conversation. So
Great.
Thank you so much, Stephen.
Well, thank you for the opportunity and being interested, and especially for thinking about it and having a look at these things. And I mean, crowd pleasers are not that hard to find.
Right.
But a project that treats people like human beings and adults and doesn't pretend that everything's secretly going to be okay in the end.
Yes.
That's I think that's rarer, and that's the standard I've held myself to in all the public work I've done over the years, and I think that's in this book, and I appreciate you asking me about it.
Yeah, thank you. So with that, the container is now closed.